You're listening to the Point. Ready or not, let's keep it real at Turning Point.
All right, welcome to the talk. Real issues, real life, and they do happen, whether we're ready or not. The unplanned, the unexpected, the unseen can kind of sweep us off our feet. We have plans, and they don't always work out. So when interruptions occur or conflict rises, it's an opportunity for us. We stand at a turning point. And so that's the goal of our talks, is to explore these areas of life with women who have been through our doors, what it was like then, what it's like now, and the obstacles that stood in their way, what they've overcome. I'm Debbie Taylor. I have the privilege of being the director of Turning Point. And with me is Sherry Love, Turning Point's nurse manager, and a young woman today who has been through our doors, who I find brilliant and courageous. And I don't know about you, but courage inspires us. And so we hope that her story today will inspire you. And so we are going to introduce her right now. Let her tell you a little bit about herself.
So I'm a mom of 2 kids. I have a 1-year-old daughter and I have a 4-year-old son. I don't have custody of my son because I kind of had a rough go at it when I was a parent the first time around. Even the second time around, I had a rough go at it. But I've struggled with a lot of stuff: addiction, homelessness, unplanned pregnancy. I faced abortion before, single parenting, shared parenting. One of the biggest things that really was a huge obstacle to overcome was the drug addiction. I started using drugs when I was probably about 14, and it moved to be meth when I was about 15 or 16, all the way through my pregnancy with my son. At the hospital, when I had my son, he tested positive for weed, which I'm happy was the only thing he tested positive for, because I was using meth during my pregnancy.
Did you know the risk factors when you were pregnant? Do you feel like anybody educated you in that sense?
When I found out I was pregnant, my cousin wanted me to have an abortion due to the fact that I was using drugs. I had the appointment scheduled. I got home one day and there was a letter on my bed with Google statistics and everything. And so I knew the risk, but it wasn't gonna change anything for me because I had already been using, and I had such a severe addiction that even when I would try, I would fail. And I kept trying to get clean, but then something would happen. I would make an excuse to use again. I wasn't able to get clean from meth until about a month before he was born, and I smoked weed on the way to the hospital because I didn't think it was a big deal because I was young and I was like, oh, well, weed isn't even a drug, but it most definitely is. So CYFD got involved and I got clean and got a house and got a job and was doing really well. But then I thought I had it all handled and I started using drugs maybe like 8 months later, 8 months after he was born. It went from just once a week to once a day to I couldn't wake up without it. When my son was about 2.5 years old, my mom actually called CYFD on me again and he was taken. And at that point, I was really scared and I was really upset and I was blaming everyone else but myself. I was blaming anybody I could blame. I ended up losing my house and losing my job and losing pretty much everything. And then being homeless and everything like that, and not being able to see my son, who I hadn't been separated from since he was born. I was really depressed one night and I took a bunch of pills to kind of end it all. And I ended up going to the hospital. And at the hospital, the doctors told me, well, 1, I was going to be at the hospital for another week because I tried to commit suicide, and 2, that I was 4.5 weeks pregnant.
Did you have any idea at that time that you were pregnant?
No, honestly, my life was going so fast from day to day that I didn't even think. I knew I was doing risky things and I knew I was having risky behaviors with whoever, but I didn't even think about it.
How did you feel when they told you were pregnant?
I was like, seriously, seriously, this is not happening. Like, I think I even asked the doctor, like, for real? Like, really? But then it was just kind of a mix of emotions. I had to stay at the hospital for 7 days. So for those 7 days, I was clean and I got out of the hospital like, heck yeah, I'm going to get my son back. I'm going to have this baby. Everything's going to be good. So whenever I got out of the hospital, I contacted the person that had my son and I told them I was clean. And then I just wanted to see my son, and she said no. And so I used right after that. And then I was always going back and forth, like, do I have an abortion? I don't even have a place to live. I don't believe in abortion, but I don't have a place to live. I'm doing drugs. I've been drinking. With my first pregnancy, I never drank. But with this one, I was drinking, and I knew that for sure, I knew that every drug has its own effect, but I knew that drinking, my mom's best friend has fetal alcohol syndrome. So I knew that it was bad, and I knew that how I found out I was pregnant. I knew it all.
So, and for those of you who don't know, Sherry Love was a labor and delivery nurse for many years.
Yes.
And so what do you think, I mean, I know you've seen a lot of it in labor
Right.
and delivery coming through the hospital. Do you feel like there's enough education out there?
I don't feel like there's enough education. I feel like there's a stigma attached to being pregnant and using. And so I think a lot of people deny or don't, there's a lot more to addiction than a lot of people realize. And you definitely need help to get out of that cycle. It's more of a disease. It's not something you can do by yourself. You need help.
For some reason, I never really believed in God, but I believed in doing the right thing. And to me at that point, I knew doing drugs pregnant was a bad thing, but I thought that the rightest thing I could do at the time was at least be honest with my doctor and let my doctor know. And so for my son, they gave me a high-risk ultrasound tech. And I remember going for the last ultrasound with my son, and she told me, she said, you're going to be a parent in a month. Like, are you still using? And I said, no, I'm not using. And I was. And she was like, okay, well, I'm just going to tell you the hard truth. There hasn't been many studies as to the effects of marijuana and methamphetamine on a baby, but the ones that we do have shows that cocaine and alcohol will physically deform a child, but methamphetamine and marijuana are more of a mental deformity. And so for some reason I justified it in my head. I was like, oh, well, at least I'm not drinking and doing cocaine. Like, my kid's gonna look normal. But now I do see some signs in my son, who's only 4 years old. I see like hyperactivity and not being able to focus and stuff like that. But I'm happy I'm clean now because I'm able to deal with that head on rather than keep the cycle going.
Right.
So
what does it feel like to share that? When you talk about your past, when you talk about pregnancy and using, what do you feel when you share that?
I feel better sharing it because everyone has a past, and that just so happens to be my past, and I love my kids no differently. If not, I love them more because they're my kids. They're my mess. This is my mess, and I own it because that's all I can do. If I can't run from it, and honesty is the only way to get anywhere. If you're trying to fix lies, then the stuff that needs to be fixed is not going to get fixed. So for an example, I have my daughter working with Aprendamos. I have my son at Amistad. I just want them to have the best shot at life. And I know that they started out with below average shot at life.
So you talked about working to get your son back. He's not living with you at the present time.
No.
Okay. So what have you had to do up to this point, and then what does the road going forward look like?
So the law in New Mexico is that after 90 days, a child outside of the home is technically or can be technically deemed as abandoned. So CYFD took my son, placed him with a family member, and after 90 days of me trying and failing to get clean, that family member filed for kinship guardianship, at which case CYFD did file child abuse charges against me. So at that point, my son became a victim in a felony case. So I wasn't able to see him for multiple reasons. And so they were able to get the custody granted because I couldn't see him anyways. And I think that everyone thought I would just give up at that point. Even I thought I would give up because I had no idea where to go from there.
Yeah, that's pretty insurmountable. And you think about the 8 months that you were able to stay clean and then went back.
Yeah.
You would think that definitely you would slip back.
Yeah. So everyone thought I was going to fail. I lost family. I lost the support of nearly anyone who didn't use drugs. And I just had the support of people that did use drugs. So it wasn't really much support.
So what was the first step?
I filed a petition. So basically, CYFD had closed the case because my son was in a safe place. So CYFD was no longer involved. Now it was with the Third Judicial Court. I filed a petition against the guardianship in January, and they had gotten guardianship in December. And then the judge retired, so it took a bit longer. So I kept having to call the courts and say, hey, this has been a long time. But we finally got a hearing in May of that year. So this is about 7 months after he had been, 6 months after he had been, 6 months I had gone without seeing him.
That's a long time.
Yeah. I feel like anyone at that point, it would be really easy to stop. And it would be really easy to say, okay, maybe this is what needs to happen. But I was attached to my son with or without drugs. I love my son. And despite the drugs, I guess is a better way of saying it, I love my son. I wanted him to know where he belonged and know where he came from. And my worst fear is for him to grow up and feel like, wow, both my parents abandoned me for this drug. Let me go ahead and see what it's all about. That's my worst fear. And as long as I'm there to make sure that doesn't happen, I feel like he has a better shot at not doing that. Anyways, so in May of that year, we had a hearing. At this time, I had just found out I was pregnant with my daughter. I was homeless. I was still using. And the judge asked me if I agreed with the guardianship. And at that point, I said, no, eventually I want my kid back. But right now I can't take him. I don't have a place. A lot of people rely on their tax refund. And I was relying on my tax refund and something happened. So there's a lesson there. But so I had no money. I had no job. I had no place. I had my car and that was about it.
So where were you living at this time?
At this time, I was between friends' houses. I was somewhat staying with my daughter's dad. Well, at that time I was pregnant, so the father of my child, I was staying there. He had his own issues too, though, and so we both were just kind of broken people. So I was just back and forth, and then the judge at that hearing went ahead and granted visitation at FYI. So I went and I found the $20. I got the money to pay, did the intake and everything, and they do drug tests. So I was like, oh shoot, I'm gonna have to get clean. So I started thinking about that, but then the other person that has my child never went. So I had to file again at court. And so we got another hearing in August of that year. And then the judge went ahead and granted visits at a fast food place where my son and I would meet, and then the other person would watch the visit. And so we started doing that, but then inconsistency with visits happened and stuff, and there was a lot of hard feelings between myself and the person that has my son that were just surfacing, and it just wasn't a good environment. So we ended up going back to court again because of the inconsistency. And it's been like that. But now we've gone back to court maybe 2 more times. And this whole time I've had to do it. You have to stay on top of things, and you have to kind of become like a paralegal and learn all these papers and what to do and stuff like that. And just ask questions. When you need help, ask for it. Bug people.
It's probably overwhelming.
It was. And there was a lot of times when I wanted to give up. But I know my son, it's not just me that wants to see him. He has a whole family now that just wanted to see me clean and just want to be reunited with him. And I don't want to deny him that. So I have a lot of pressure that way too. But that's my baby. So every time it's hard, I just think about it's all worth it. And if I stopped, who would I be to stop? What would that... How would I feel?
Like? That's so awesome that you can see that ahead of time. What would it be like?
Yeah. But now the judge at this last hearing says that, now I'm employed somewhere where I really love to work. I've been about a year and 4 months sober. I have my daughter. I have a place. Yeah, I just set up his room because the judge is saying that eventually she sees 50-50 custody happening because of the strides that I've made to be a better person. I go to church. Back then, I would have never thought I'd be like, God isn't whatever. Like, that's not even a thing. Like, that's nothing, but it's helped a lot. And before, honestly, I started going to church just to prove everything wrong. I was like, I want to know about this so I can just prove that wrong because it's not right. And now I'm there every Sunday, so it helps a lot. But
so 2 years ago, you would have been able to get a glimpse of where you are now.
I don't even know. I don't even think, honestly,
Probably doesn't even feel like your life.
Yeah, I would have been like, what? And honestly, 2 years ago, I wouldn't even know if this is what I would have wanted.
Well, we were talking about that earlier, just the knowing who you are, but hearing the story of you in the hospital after the suicide attempt. I mean, it seems like two different people. Mm-hmm. It doesn't feel like that's who you are.
Yeah, and it has a lot to do with your mind state. 2 years ago, I was blaming everybody else but myself. And again, honesty, like, once you're honest with yourself, you can truly figure out what it is that you want to do and who you want to be. But as long as you're being dishonest with everyone else and yourself, you're not gonna, it's hard to do anything because then you're
the victim instead of in control of your life. Mm-hmm. And I think that has a lot to do with, anxiety is such an issue nowadays, but I think that's it. You identify the problem and you figure out how to solve the problem. And I love what Sherry always says to clients, what do you know is true right now? Right? Stay in your time zone. What is true right now? What is true today? And what can you fix today?
Mm-hmm. And that's a big, like, I know this is some weird NA kind of thing, but just one day at a time, that's a big thing. It's
true. It really is.
I'm even on a diet right now, and it's one day at a time.
Except for Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
We won't talk about that.
But yeah, I mean, everything, you just take it one step at a time, and even after that, you can bring it down to 1 minute at a time, just doing what, I don't know.
Right. Gets you through that couple of minutes, and that gets you through half a day, gets you through a whole day. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And one of the biggest things that kept me going, fighting for my son, is, I don't know, it's just, I knew that in 5 years from now, 4 years from now, I want to be able to at least, even if I don't get him back, I want to be able to at least say that I tried.
If you've heard today's podcast and feel you're ready to take the next step in finding your turning point, call the National Suicide Prevention Line at 1-800-273-8255. Suicide is one of the leading causes of death within pregnant or recently pregnant women. So keep that in mind. You're not alone in this capacity. Also, in pregnant teens, 15% are struggling with substance abuse. So you can also call the National Drug Helpline at 1-800-662-4357. And again, as always, if you have an unplanned pregnancy, you can look us up on pregnancylosscruces.com, or you can text or call us at 575-520-1147. Please leave us a comment or a review at the end of this podcast. It will help us as we go forward. You can also like us on Facebook or follow us on Instagram. And remember, stars can't shine without darkness.